Here from Harvest Christian Fellowship, my beautiful wife Suzanne.
Hello, all.
And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about marriage counseling, and we're going to go off by a thing called the Five Love Languages. The writer of Five Love Languages is Gary Chapman.
That's right.
And this book has been out for...
I was thinking about it. It came out before we got married.
Yeah, quite a while.
So probably at least over, I'd say 30 years.
I would say
Maybe.
so. Yeah. It's been a while. It's a really, really good book, and we really believe that the Five Love Languages speaks volumes.
Absolutely.
And we think that when it comes down to marriage counseling, it's very, very important that people get as much advice as possible.
Absolutely.
Because what is the statistics of marriage divorce these days? And
I don't know. I
think last time was like 50%.
It used to be 50, but I would say that's probably gone up.
Yeah, and even now among Christians,
right?
It can be
Staggering.
pretty staggering. Yep. So we are hoping that this marriage counseling will help you, encourage you, whether you are married, whether you are planning to get married.
That's right.
If you're single, even if you're single, these love languages can help you out with relationships.
That's right.
Of all kinds. And I know that Gary Chapman has come up with many other types of love languages.
He did.
Love languages for parents to children.
Right.
And for couples, for singles, for workplace. The love languages really speaks volume when it comes down to how to deal with marriage, how to communicate. So just a little bit about ourselves. My wife and I, we've been married 21 years.
21 years.
We have 7 children, 7 daughters. Our oldest is married. She has a son, a 1-year-old.
1-year-old.
So we are grandparents. We have 7 daughters. So 7 daughters poses a challenge, of course.
Absolutely.
But nothing that God cannot handle and deal with. We have a fantastic marriage. My wife and I, we love each other. And we really love the Lord. And I think that is really key.
Amen.
When it comes down to having a marriage.
Having a marriage or a good marriage?
A good marriage, really. Having a good marriage.
That's
a good
right.
marriage is really loving Jesus.
Absolutely.
Marriages aren't always perfect.
No.
I mean, there are good times, there are bad times, there's failures, there's successes when it comes down to marriage. There's times when you bump heads, there's times when the other spouse fails. But when that time comes, it really comes down to giving it to Jesus and letting Jesus
take care of it.
Yep, take care of it. Take care of it. And I know that I, as a spouse, haven't been perfect. I'm not infallible. I guess you would say I'm fallible. I've said things to my wife I shouldn't say, and I've acted ways I shouldn't act. But by the grace of God, by His mercy, by His love, He allows my wife to forgive me, and I to forgive my wife. That when she falls short or I fall short, that God kind of gives grace, and He fills in the blank. So it's very, very important. But we really found that the love languages really speaks, kind of allows you to be able to speak each other's language.
That's right. And it's interesting because people usually say, oh, my husband and I are married. But when you're in a godly marriage, you don't have a parallel relationship. You have a relationship that is demonstrated like a triangle where God's at the top and then you're together and then together this way. Yeah. And if you really think about it, I mean, that's the best marriage that can be.
Yeah.
Because I'm not perfect and you're not perfect, but with Christ, He brings us all together and it just makes things work.
Amen. So, I mean, a triangle is fantastic. It's a great depiction because if you look at 2 people, one to the right, one to the left, and the closer they are to God, the closer
they get to
the couple gets to the marriage, to each other.
That's right.
So the closer we are to God, the closer we are to one another, because that's what the triangle brings.
That's right.
It brings us closer to one another. But the further we are away from God, the further we are from one another. So I always say that the greatest thing to do is in a marriage is make Jesus Christ the top of the marriage.
That's right.
And then both of you individually, very important.
Absolutely.
Individually draw closer to Jesus and let him be the one who holds you guys together. Very, very important.
Absolutely.
When it comes down to marrying one or being in a relationship.
Godly relationship.
Godly
Absolutely.
relationship. So again, we're going to talk about the 5 love languages. Let's talk about what the languages are. First of all, there are 5 love languages to the marriage.
That's right.
And they're pretty much characteristic as in the words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch.
That's right. And I love the analogy that
Yes.
we have on the screen.
So I thought, you know what? The best way to deal with it is to talk my wife's language.
That's right.
And probably
Coffee.
or many of you guys, coffee. So words of affirmation
That's right.
would be something as if my wife made coffee and I were to drink the coffee and go, this coffee is delicious. You
Right.
did a great job, honey. Fantastic. Okay. That would be words of affirmation to her.
That's right.
Okay. You want to do acts of service?
Acts of service is, hey, I made you coffee. Getting up in the morning and getting the coffee and say, here, just for you, because I know you love coffee, I made you coffee. Here you go.
Yeah. So her making coffee to me
Is a service.
is acts of service. Or me saying, receiving gifts would be, here's a coffee. Me giving her a coffee. Here you go. I bought a coffee. Here you go. So there's no really effort other than me buying something and me giving it to her, saying, here is a gift of coffee.
Right. And that's a great gift when you're on vacation with 7 kids.
That's right. That's right.
Here, honey, have a coffee.
That's right.
Quality time is the next one. Quality time is, hey, let's go get a coffee
Yeah.
together. Let's go. You and I, we're going to go get a coffee, hang out. Let's spend some time together.
Yeah, it's as simple of just us hanging out. And there's nothing in particular, just being around someone, and that could be a quality time. Of course, physical touch would be, let me hold you like a coffee, okay? Like, I said, let me hold you like a coffee, all right? So physical touch is also, so these 5 love languages is affirmation. Again, your coffee is delicious. You did a
Right.
great job. Acts of service. I made you coffee. I actually did something, made you coffee. And then receiving gifts is, here's a coffee. I bought you coffee. And then quality time. Hey, let's go get coffee. Let's hang out. Let's enjoy that time. And then the physical touch is, let me hold you like a coffee. Okay. So love languages are very, very important. Now,
That's right.
again, this is just the intro, and we're going to go through these as we go through this marriage counseling. But these are the 5 love languages we are going to be talking about. And of course, we're not going to just use as coffee, but they're going to be used as different analogies.
Different ways.
So that way
Absolutely.
you'll be able to communicate. You have these languages.
Right.
If I'm Middle Eastern and I only speak Arabic, and my wife is English, she only speaks English. There has to be a way for her to communicate to me and me to communicate to her.
Right.
So we have to be able to communicate to one another.
Right.
Okay.
And the thing is everybody's different.
Yes,
You know?
everybody's different.
Everyone is different. And, you may be trying and trying and trying, thinking, oh, well, this is how I feel love. This is how you're going to feel love. But you realize that's not the case.
Yeah.
Because everybody's different.
Amen. So it's very, very important
To figure it out.
To figure out, if I want to communicate to my wife, I need to figure out what her love language is.
That's right.
I know what my love language is. I need to communicate her love language.
That's right.
And unfortunately, a lot of people, what they do is when it comes down to love languages is they know what their love language is, and they think that them speaking to their spouse is communicating love, but it really isn't.
Right.
For example, if my love language is words of affirmation, but hers is acts of service, I can tell her, oh, honey, your coffee is delicious. This coffee is so delicious. You made a great cup of coffee, okay? I may say that. But if her love language is I made you coffee, she's like, yeah, I made the coffee, well, I'm telling you your coffee's great, but I'm not communicating love to her, because what's communicating love to her is if I made the coffee. So if I made the coffee and said, here you go, honey, I made you this coffee, and she would be like, oh, he loves me. He loves me.
Right.
because he made me this coffee. So
Right.
I can say whatever I wanted to say to her, but if I don't actually speak her languages by making the coffee,
Right.
it doesn't mean anything. So if I come into the kitchen and she made the coffee and I just drink the coffee and tell her how great this coffee is, she may look at me with contempt like, I
Why
made
don't
this.
you get up
Why
and
don't
make
you
the
get up,
coffee
make her coffee, that's
first?"
your own self, right? Because that's not her thing,
Right.
okay? So, but if her thing is acts of service, if I made the coffee and gave it to her and said, "Here you go, honey, here's a cup of coffee," she'd be like, "Oh, he loves me." So me telling her how great the coffee she made may not communicate love to her, but me giving her the coffee,
Making me the coffee.
making me the coffee is something.
That's
okay,
right.
that
That's
communicates because it's taken time. And same thing. If her quality time, if her love language is quality time, okay, I can make her coffee. Say, "Here you go, honey. I made you coffee," and then left. She'd be like, "What? Where did you go?" I mean,
right.
I may not communicate love to her because I'll be like, "What? I made you coffee. I don't need to hang around." But to her,
That's the
spending
important part.
time, the important part is spending time with her. That communicates
Love.
love to her. So you got to figure out what is the love language for your spouse, because if her love language is words of affirmation or acts of service, but I go out and I just buy her a cup of coffee. I'm like, "Hey, I bought you a cup of coffee. Here you go, hon, bye." And I'm like, "What? I bought you a cup of coffee. That should." She's like, "Yeah, but you didn't spend time with me.
Right.
You didn't talk to me. You didn't touch me. You didn't give me a kiss." That might be, I'm not communicating love to her, but I'm thinking, well, man, I'd appreciate it if she gave me a cup of coffee. Yeah, you would, because that's probably your love language.
Right.
That's not her love language.
That's right.
And usually it's very, very important to speak each other's love language.
It is important to speak each other's love language.
It-
It's what makes a successful marriage.
Yes. So in a love language, when you talk to each other's love language, when I talk her love language and she talks my love language, we're depositing that love. So
right.
I'm depositing that love. So you got to figure out what is your spouse's love language. And as we go through it, you'll figure that out, and maybe your spouse will figure out what their love language is. Okay.
That's right.
So in love, there is a thing called the love bank.
That's right.
The love bank is very, very important. Okay. The love bank allows a person to deposit that love. So if I love my wife and I tell her, "Honey," or if her love language is physical touch, every time I touch her, I'm depositing her into her piggy bank.
That's right.
Into her love bank.
You're
So I'm
making a deposit.
I'm making a deposit into her piggy bank. If her love language is words of affirmation, I go, "Honey, your hair is so beautiful. Your eyes are so beautiful." So you can see. So I'm now depositing into her love language. Okay. So if I give my wife a gift, I'm like, "Here you go, honey. Here's a phone. I bought you a gift." That might be not. She'd be like, "Okay, whatever." I might not be depositing. But if I say to her, "Oh, you okay?
If I break it,
You're so beautiful,
you may be
honey."
buying me a new phone.
So I may be speaking her love language when I talk to her, or if I touch her hand like this.
Right.
I could just be spending some time. She may look at me and go, "Oh, I'm depositing that." But listen, if all I'm doing is I'm giving her gifts, but never spending time with her, or never talking to her, or never, maybe giving, or maybe not touching her or anything, I'm not depositing anything. But if I tell her, "What the heck is going on with your hair? What is going on?" So let's say her love language is words of affirmation, which are words, and I tell her, like, I cut her down.
Right.
What I'm doing now is I'm
Withdrawing.
I'm withdrawing
Right.
from the love bank. I'm withdrawing. So when you withdraw from the love bank, you're like, "Oh, I'm taken away.
That's right.
So I start taking away from the love bank.
And this is what happens too often in marriage.
Yes.
Is that there's more withdrawals than there are deposits.
Yes.
And that's when marriages start becoming faulty. He doesn't love me. I'm not going to show him my love. I'm not going to give him his love language because he's not showing me my love language.
Yeah.
He's not showing me love, so I'm not going to show him love. And that's where the problems begin, and that's where your bank becomes bankrupt.
That's right.
You can sit there and because you can turn and you can use their love language against them.
Yeah.
If I know that my husband's love language is physical touch, and that is what makes him feel loved from me, if I turn around and go, I don't want anything to do with you, and he turns to me, husbands and wives, you give that like, hey, and you're like, I'm tired, and you flip over and go to sleep, you've just withdrawn from him.
Yeah.
You have made a withdrawal. It's not like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry, I'm tired. Oh, okay, honey, I get it. But you've made it a point of being like, no, and you turn over. That's a withdrawal, because his love language is physical touch, and he needs and he wants that touch. You've withdrawn, which has been brought his love bank down.
Yeah. And that's what happens when people say, well, I fell out of love.
That's right.
I don't love you anymore. You've run the bank is running on empty. And a lot of people's love bank runs on empty.
Or in a deficit.
Or
almost.
in a deficit. You go love bankrupt.
Yeah.
Because you haven't taught the love languages. You haven't expressed these, and you start withdrawing. You start taking away more than you're putting into your love language. And when that happens, a person gets bankrupt. The person falls out of love. They don't love you anymore because you're not using the love languages on that. And again, it's about depositing, figuring out what the love language. Now, the love bank is very, very important. I just really want to stress how important the love bank is, because the love bank is so important. You have to learn what your spouse's love language is and deposit that love. And you can't just let them deposit the money. You have to have this is a joint bank account. This is a joint love account. And that joint love bank is about you both depositing that love into one another. It's not just one person.
That's right.
Now, which brings us to the thing is sometimes you do have one person who's more dominant than the other, who's depositing more love than the other. Okay? For example, a person who goes to a person who's like a wife. A wife, she cooks, she cleans, maybe she's a homemaker, so she's cooking and cleaning and taking care of the children. She has dinner for you prepared all the time, and she's constantly, really like trying to be acts of service, and has everything, and she's depositing, and you're like, oh, she's so nice, and she's treating me good. She touches you. She's giving you all these love language, all these things. She's speaking your language. And all you have to do is complain. Oh, work is this. Oh, I'm so sick and tired. I don't have time. After you eat, you go straight to the office and you continue to work, and you don't spend time and sitting down, maybe watching television or playing a 10,000, a game or something, or doing something with where you're spending that time. Right. But you think, oh, and she's depositing, and you're not depositing anything. And the other side is feeling like their love bank is running low.
Right.
They're like, man, you feel like you're loved, but you're thinking, well, I'm depositing the bank account into her bank account because I go to work and I'm bringing in the money and I'm paying all this. But that's not her love language.
Right.
Her love language isn't about that. Her love language is just the words of saying, this food is great, honey. We're sitting down, spending time with one another. Right. Or maybe, gifts, or maybe words of affirmation, or maybe physical touch. The simple, like just holding the hand lets her know, hey, you're depositing love into that person. That's so, right. Having your love language is very, very important. Figuring out what your spouse's love language is and depositing into the love bank.
Right. So, because a lot of times, especially, I've been a housewife our whole marriage. And, I'll speak to housewives. A lot of wives can feel like their love bank can run low sometimes. I'm very blessed with a husband who's very conscious of my love bank. He reads me well. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. But he reads me, and he knows, to me, I know... I'm big into doing acts of service. I do a lot of things because I first of all, I enjoy doing them, but I also appreciate when he comes home and notices and says, oh, wow, look at that. That brings the love bank up. Now he, like you were saying, can have that attitude of, Okay, well, you're home. That's what you do. Just like you come home from work and I'm like, okay, that's what you do, you
Yeah.
know? But realizing it's so important if your spouse's love language is that words of affirmation or whatever it is, to say, hey, I appreciate it. I mean, it's easy for a housewife to not ever look at her husband and say, I appreciate the fact that you go out every day. You spend 5, 6, 7 days out of the week, taking care of us. I appreciate it. Because there's some men, I would say majority men are not the words of affirmation, but there's some men that they want to hear that. They want to know, hey, and it's so important to figure it out, because we have to make sure that our banks are full.
Yes.
And we have to be cognizant. We have to think about it. We have to be like, okay, if he's feeling off, why is he feeling off? Is it something I've done? And it's important to be able to speak to your spouse about it. To say, what's going on? If I know his is physical touch. Now, is there times in life that you're just so busy that you just kind of like, I don't know, you just, not that you don't forget, but you say, oh, I love you, and you pat him and you go on. It's important as a couple to be like, hey, do you realize that you haven't grabbed my hand, or you haven't touched me, or you haven't whatever in 2 days or 3 days or whatever it is? And you, as the spouse, the receiving spouse, have to be like, oh, really? I haven't? We've done that.
Yeah.
Where there's times that you're like, wait, it's important, because if he feels like his love bank is running low,
I've
knows.
never 2 days.
Huh?
No, 2 days. What are you talking about?
But
maybe like, oh, did you give me a kiss this morning?
But
Did you kiss
right?
me this morning? It's more like one
Same
more.
day.
If I get up in the morning and I go get coffee and I come back and I sit down to the Bible, she'd be like, "Did you kiss me this morning?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't." I give her a kiss.
But
So,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's that important to just be like, hey, it's to stay on top of it, to not let it go too far, to not let it go too long, to think, okay, did we do that? And you may think, oh, well, now you're just being mechanical, but you're not. It's being conscious of each other. It's, there's a scripture about, that scripture about don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Don't give the devil a foothold. Don't let the adversary come in and take a foothold. And that's sometimes what happens or a lot of times what happens in marriage, because you're not conscious.
Yeah.
And you've given that opportunity for whatever to come in, and before you know it, you're like way out in left field.
Yeah. And I think it's very simple. It's very easy to show other person the love when you've depositing.
That's right.
So if my love language is acts of service and physical touch, that's my love language. So if my wife cleans the house or whatever she does, or just runs an errand for me, or she helps me out with something, and I just need help, that's like an act of service where she's like, you know what, I'll take these to the mail, or I'll pick that up from, Home Depot or whatever it is. I'll do that. And I'm like, oh, good. It's like, poof, thank you. Like, that little thing right there speaks, man, thank God. What a wonderful woman. She speaks love language to me. So I can say to her, because acts of service is not always house clean, food on the table, laundry made. It could be like, I'll pay the bills. I'll pay the bill. I'll write the checks, or I'll pick this up from the laundromat, or I'll go, from the dry cleaners, or I'll do this, or I got this covered. I'll take this mail out, or, hey, I fixed this, it's all done. Those little things that alleviate that little pressure on me is maybe an act of service to her. So to me, it speaks volumes to me, and it makes me then be able to look at my wife and go, you're such a good woman. I love you. And then I'm able to speak her love language, which is maybe words of affirmation and physical touch, or it could be words of affirmation and quality time. I think my wife is between those, right?
Words of affirmation is definitely my
words
top.
of affirmation. So it's actually And then, of course, as time goes on, these they change over the
Right,
years. A lot of people don't
absolutely.
realize
Yes.
that as you get older, as different stages in your life, you may have been words of affirmation and quality time. Now it's words of affirmation and physical touch,
Right.
and now it's words of affirmation and acts of service. Okay.
Right. Yeah, especially when you go through the child, your child years and you have kids and, or maybe you have a husband who has a job where he's gone a lot or whatever, when, it makes them change because you don't have quality time. Maybe that's not initially your love language, but when you don't have the time, you're like, wait, that's what I need now. Like, you need to get that time. I need time with you. Where maybe if you're together all the time, that's not your you don't need that as to feel loved because you're always together. So it changes over time, as you grow older or as you have children or as your children grow older, it changes.
Yeah. So if mine is not receiving gifts. It's not my love language.
Not mine either.
So if my wife if I come home or she comes home and she says, "Hey, I bought you a gift," and I'm like, "Okay." And
how much did you spend?
Yeah, how much did you spend? Why did you buy me a gift?
Why?
Not buying it is the gift.
That's
you
right.
know what I mean? So she might give me a gift, and I'm like, "Well, that's
great.
Great, thank you." Okay, But to some people, receiving a gift is like, "Oh, he loves me. He bought me roses."
Right.
If she bought me roses, I think okay, why did you buy roses? They're gonna die.
That's
one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But to her, again, it's trying to figure out
what it is,
and then once you figure out what that love language is, it's about taking that and depositing
right.
the love language.
That's
because the more you deposit into the spouse's love language, the easier it is for you to make a withdrawal. And what I mean by that is for her to give you back the
right.
love. Okay?
That's right.
So if I want physical touch, if my love language is physical touch, and again, we're going to go through the other videos. We're going to talk about the love languages. But I just want you to understand how the love bank works. If my love language is physical touch, and I want my wife to speak my language, I need to speak her language. So in order for me to communicate with my wife and her to communicate with me, I need to speak her love language. So if my love language is physical touch, and I know her love language is words of affirmation, I'm going to speak her language so she understands me. She said, "Oh, honey, you're so beautiful. You're so gorgeous. Look at
I'm on to you now.
Your eyes are so beautiful." I mean, she's got beautiful eyes. She does. So if I speak those words to her, she starts feeling like, oh, okay, thank you. And then she starts, "Oh, thank you," like that. Now, how did I speak my love language? How did I get her to speak my love language? Is by me speaking her love language.
That's right.
But if my love language is physical touch, and I come up to my wife and I'm like,
she may be like, "Leave my hair alone.
Yeah,
why are you touching me?
Yeah, why are you touching me? Or what do you want?
What do you want?
Like what? See, I'm touching you. I'm speaking a love language. That may not be her love language. So in order for me to tell her to speak my love language, I need to communicate her love language.
Right.
By the way, I like your eyeshadow. It's so gorgeous.
Thank you.
So I speak her love language, and then she'll speak my love language.
Right.
So people have this biggest problem about trying to speak her love language, or if she wants me to speak her love language, and she knows my love language is physical touch, she can be just she can just touch me, and if she touches me, and I'm like, "Oh, hi, how are you? What's gorgeous?" So I'm talking to her. Now I'm talking to her. Why? Because she's speaking my love language.
That's right.
And I'm like, "Oh, what can I do for you?" What's up? She's like, "Hey, honey, do you think you can, do such and such?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, fine, no problem." Why?
You want to take out the trash?
Take out the trash, yeah. Aww. Oh, yeah. Of course, yeah, I'll take out the trash.
I've got an oil change to do.
So I'm now speaking her love language, okay? Now, this is for married couple, not married couple. You're going to get married. However it is, understanding the love language and then being able to communicate that love language to get for her to communicate. It's like me speaking Arabic, she speaks English. If I'm speaking Arabic, when I say "Shu malik ya mara," "Shu ana bahibbik," and she's gonna look at me going, "What are you talking about?" Like she's gonna look at me like I'm crazy. But if I speak her love language and she speaks mine, we can then communicate. But in order for her to speak my language, I need to speak her language first.
That's right.
And that's why when people go, my love language, my wife never touches me. She never puts her arm around me. She never, well, are you talking her language?
Right.
You know, are you speaking her? I mean, you're talking about you, but what about you? Do you ever
You can't
touch her? Do
expect
you?
to get something that you're not willing to give.
Yes. And if you're not speaking their love language, you can't expect them to speak your love language.
right.
Very, very important when it comes down
Amen.
to this.
That's right.
So again, this is the first part of the 5 love languages, and really talking. We're going to get into detail on each and every one of them, elaborate a little bit, and talk about it. So I hope you like this, and stay tuned for other parts. But until then, you know, we ask you to keep your eyes on the Lord, focus on Him, trust in Him,
That's right.
and maybe you can talk about the five love languages. Gary Chapman has a fantastic survey on
Right.
what do you call it, on the internet that
Right.
talks about taking a quiz, the 5 love language quiz, and it asks you questions.
That's right.
And you're like, what is my love language? I really don't know what my love language is.
Right.
There's a quiz that you take. You can take it together, you could take it separately, and let the person answer the question, and then you can find out what that person's love language is, and they can find out what your love language is, and then being able to use that. So there are great resources, but we want to give you the personal touch of what it means to be married 21 years, to have 7 beautiful children, a grandchild, pastoring a church, and all these things, and even working full-time jobs and careers and businesses and all these things, and still be successful and have enough time to have a successful marriage, because you're putting the Lord number one. He's always number one.
That's right.
And when the Lord is always number one in your life, guess who's right there? Your spouse is always going to be right there, because she's making the Lord number one. You're making the Lord number one. And no matter if the Lord's number one in your business, if the Lord's number one in your fellowship, in your ministries, if the Lord's number one in your hobbies, if the Lord is always number one, you will always find that if you just turn to your side there, your spouse is right there, because she's right there with the Lord also.
But you said it, and it was key. What you said is that marriage takes time.
Amen.
It takes time. You know, I think 21 years, you could say we could be taking for granted. You know, you can be taken for granted. You can be like, well, they're here. You know, they're still, but you can't do that. You have to take the time.
Amen.
And it does take time. Good marriage takes time. It takes time to think about someone other than yourself, to realize what the other person needs. And it takes that commitment. I mean, you made a commitment. We made a commitment before God, 21 years ago. And it doesn't change over time. The commitment, if nothing else, gets stronger. And we have to remember to take the time. You can't neglect the things, because if you neglect those things in marriage, you're going to have a bad marriage.
Amen.
21 years, I think we've learned, and I pray 100 more years. We only get better and better, but you have to learn. It takes time, and you think, well, I don't have time. Time is the best. Your marriage outside of Christ, your marriage is the best thing to invest your time in.
That's right.
Because I know you have a job or kids or whatever, but Jesus
Hobbies,
Christ, number one.
Even after your children grow up,
marriage,
right?
number two.
That's right.
We were talking last week about the fact that we were talking about divorce, but we were talking about the fact that people get divorced after their kids leave. They get that empty nest, and they I don't know who that is anymore. Who is this, It's important. That's one reason it's important to sit there and to know their love language, to fill their bank, to know who your spouse is. Michael's not the same man I married 21 years ago. He's a different man. And I'm definitely not the same woman I was 21 years ago. I've changed.
Even 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
We're completely different.
Completely different.
10 years ago, it seems like who I was 10 years ago, who I was 8 years ago is different.
Very different.
Very different. I mean, your life changes. It changes.
So much.
You mature, you grow up. When you're in your 30s, when you're in your 40s, you jump into your 50s, your life changes.
That's right.
It's different. You are not the same person. So you need to learn to adapt with your spouse, with the person you're living with your family, with, you know what I mean, and grow into that relationship.
That's right.
And grow together as your pulse, your life goes in and out, and you're just both together like a heartbeat in unison.
That's right.
You know,
that's a great analogy.
Really in unison, that just so that you're constantly moving in your marriage and drawing closer.
Amen.
If one person's pulsating and the other one's not, you got a heart attack.
That's right.
And your marriage dies. It's very important. It's give and take, in and out, just allowing your marriage to grow.
That's right.
As you grow.
Amen.
So we hope this blesses you. Stay tuned for the other parts in Jesus' name.